Welcome back, everybody, to Random's Thoughts, or should I say, welcome everyone to Fright Night. Because that's exactly what we're taking a look at today. While we've been doing a lot of game reviews on stream and just in general for YouTube, both mine and more recently viewer game reviews, this time we're talking about Fright Night. What is Fright Night? Fright Night is the tournament that I've been running through the Random's Thoughts Discord. If you want to get involved, we'll be starting up Fright Night 2 pretty soon. If you want to check it out, look in the description of this YouTube video for a link to the Random's Thoughts Discord. You can jump in there and find out all the information. But to give you an idea before we dive into the actual games, what is the format of Fright Night? Because there's a number of content creators that are putting on events, and I chose a slightly different one for this. First off, there are no phobie bans. You have a phobie, you can use it. There's no limitation on stress levels either. We did do a bunch of polls before all the events started to get people's opinions, and ultimately we tried to make it as simple as possible the first time around. So this is just simply, we're gonna try it. Obviously we could adapt going forward, so we're playing it by ear. But we did have map bans, so players were to alternate bans, ban 2 maps out of whatever the current map pool is. We can't control it since the first party, the actual devs for Phobies, can rotate the maps whenever they wanted to, so we were just going to roll with it. There's only so much you can do. Other than that, it was a best 2 of 3 format, so you had to win 2 games out of 3. A player was chosen to go first, they make the first selection, they do their bans, and back and forth, and players would sync up to play their games. It was also Swiss, which if you're not familiar with that, instead of your typical bracket, where it's a single elimination bracket, you lose a game, you're out, or a double elimination bracket, where you lose 2 games, you're out. In Swiss, you get paired based on both your record within the event, and there's a set number of rounds related to how many players started in the event. In this case, we had 8 to start, so it was going to be a 3-round event. I decided not to do a cut to top whatever. We're just playing it out, getting the format under our belt, and letting people have some fun. So we're going to be jumping in with the first of several different games that I want to review from round 1 of Fright Night number 1. In this, we're featuring Lufee versus Gilbo, so let's jump into it. All right, everyone, so here we are. We are jumping into Lights Out. We have in the blue corner, the Heartbreaker himself, the Rocket Master. It's Lufee. But over on the orange side, in the orange trunks, we have Gilbo. So we'll see who comes out on top in this particular game. I do have some information from the players that I want to try and weave in as we talk about what their plays are, but let's actually get into it because we have an opening Venus from Lufee, which is something that I didn't expect. Lufee has this reputation both on stream as well as in the Discord of being a very aggressive player, hence the Heartbreaker title. Lufee very much is a master of the walk the dog strategy as well. We'll have to see if Cerberus makes an appearance, but as a response to the Venus, we see Gilbo going with, well, spreading across the board. Maggie plus 2 1-drops means that there's going to be an enormous amount of map control, board control coming out of the orange player. On the other hand, Lufee elects to start playing a little more defensively than what I would have anticipated. We get a trap, we get a cowbell, and we get a bank. So we're seeing something very different out of these players than what I would have guessed coming in. And maybe next time I'm going to have to do some predictions. Gilbo, however, is falling back into, I guess, old habits, normal habits, and that is the stabby play. The stabby play is normally the opener for Gilbo, but here we see it as the later turn entrance, and I kind of respect it on this map. Conversely, Lufee is going into a Blinky, which is one of the newer phobies that was introduced in a subsequent patch after release, but it's a big threat. It flies, it deals a bunch of damage, it's undead, it can tank fairly well. This thing could put a lot of hurt on our orange player if it's allowed. But we see the cool challenge play to get the Venus off of the lava, recap a point, and 2 of the 3 panic points go to our blue player. However, we're seeing things start to drop off and get picked off as we go on, and now we're starting the great repositioning battle. It's going to be a Gesundheit follow-up to supplement both the Blinky as well as the Venus. So we have Gilbo just advancing Stabby into not quite the heart of the enemy, but into position in order to tag the Blinky. This is going to put a lot of pressure on Lufee because there isn't a whole lot that you can dive in this scenario. You might be able to pick off the cat, maybe pick off Maggie, probably not. Really, there's not a real great way to get on the orange player's forces in this scenario. So instead, we see Blinky reposition in order to flip the panic points once again. A brief pot shot onto the cat allows Gesundheit, or is afforded to Gesundheit after it repositions on top of the obstacle. I don't know about that one. I'm not sold on that, because that means that Gesundheit goes down for free, as we see right now. There are some free shots that happen on Blinky, but the sheep here, I guess, is the big threat. The question is, can we get a big hit out of Lufee or not? I'm not a huge fan of sheep. We'll see if Lufee can make it happen. In this particular case, we see more traps going down. Almost the entire center area is lined with traps from Venus. It's lived that long. And those traps are primed and ready to go. And I get the sense we're about to have one go off. So the jar... Oop. No, not quite. The Murder Wing does escape. The Murder Wing escapes what would have been a terminal fate in this case. But we have a jar to supplement the trap damage, which is pretty important because that means that a lot of these Phobies from the orange side are going to be in danger as soon as they try to advance. So the cat recapping this point, and when I say recapping, I mean just standing on it, means that it isn't easily capped by Gilbo. But Gilbo's somewhat signature play after the stabby is Hevo. And Hevo 3.0 comes down and is now, if I were in Lufee's position, probably inducing some panic. So we see a reposition in order to cap all 3 panic points. I can respect this, trying to pressure, trying to put the onus back on Gilbo in order to do something, spread their forces. But unfortunately, even though the Venus repositioned, we now see the Venus standing on lava, getting hit by the splash from Hevo, and Blinky's probably going to go down. So those 6 keys that are in Lufee's bank are going to have to put in an enormous amount of work to try and flip this one back because it is not looking great. Now, one cool play that probably was not or may not have been known to the players, but that Gravedigger statue goes down and it actually clears out the trap from the Venus. Now, admittedly, that statue is going to be there anyway, so that spot is locked off, but that means that there isn't damage coming down onto more of our orange players' Phobies. I mentioned earlier that Lufee is the Rocket Master. This is why. We see a Rocket Man supplement the forces and actually is a pretty strong or potential counterplay to the Hevo. The sheep admittedly is looking kind of sad at this point because it was probably intended to connect with the stabby. It's unlikely that it's going to. It's unlikely that it's going to do much of anything because that Hevo kind of locks it out. Now, this positioning is, we'll say, unfortunate for our blue player because I'm anticipating a Hevo to come in and just clobber everything in this cluster here. Just clobber it. And that's what we saw. So while the Rocket Man came down, it's not necessarily going to be able to do much of anything, but we do get a really cool set of trap hits here. Sheep goes down, essentially trading for Maggie. Also, the jar goes down. It's now Rocket Man versus these other 3 Phobies. Oh, and by the way, it damaged Venus. This does not look good for the blue team. And you can probably surmise by the fact that this was the last turn, not real good for the blue team. But this was a cool game. I want to go back and actually analyze this turn by turn now that we've had the chance to watch it. So let's go back in and take a peek. All right, everybody, we're zoning back into the Lufee and Gilbo Game 1 here on Lights Out. Honestly, as we go through this game, and we just talked about it after we just viewed it, I wanted to review and see where did things actually go wrong. I think there were a couple positioning mistakes on Lufee's side that possibly cost him the game. I think there was also a somewhat over-aggressive play as far as getting Phobies on the board. Now, I'm not sold on the Venus opener in general, but given the number of traps that it ultimately crapped out, honestly, I think it's halfway decent. It actually responded fairly well. And although the Gravedigger was able to eliminate one of these traps as well as make positioning awkward, I think the latter piece, making the positioning awkward, was the bigger problem, less the removal of the trap. Because there was no way for Lufee to really get to where he needed to be. Now, this was a cool play on Lufee's part. In order to recap this, it eliminates the one key Phobie, thereby removing some of the board position from Gilbo. Now, unfortunately, this Blinky ends up doing not a whole hell of a lot over the course of the game. It didn't seem like it got 4 keys worth of value. Now, one thing that I do like that Gilbo did here is breaking some of these blocks. Typically, I see people break the top row because, just as we've seen, and I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but on a lot of maps where you have these obstacles at the start, you can break it and then you get a clean run at the neutral panic points. Now, this is where I think mistake number 1 came in. I am not a huge fan of Gesundheit overall. I don't think Gesundheit is what you want here. The reason for that is there's virtually no situation in which Stabby doesn't just invalidate the Gesundheit. So if you hang back and pop over the top to shoot at the Stabby or other Phobie that is here, Stabby moves into position and hits it. Now, you could shoot Stabby and then back off, but if at any point you ever kill Stabby with Gesundheit, the Gesundheit is dead. You would think you'd want to trade positively there, but I imagine that the scenario is probably, like, you need this Gesundheit to put in a lot of work, and I don't think it's ever going to, because if Stabby ever advances, which we ultimately see it do, it means that the Gesundheit can't ever pop up and hit something, because then it just dies, because the Stabby will hit it twice. So I don't think Stabby is what you want here. Those 2 keys could have been a 4-key unit, it could have been a bank, it could have been something, but I don't think Gesundheit is what you need here. Obviously, the cat here is able to reclaim the point. It's not a loss even if it were to die, which it doesn't yet. It will eventually, but not right now. So Gilbo is in a pretty strong position here, and setting up for what we ultimately see as a Hevo coming down the line. Now, the sheep here, I think, is mistake number 2. I don't see any reason to go sheep here. Well, I take that back. There are reasons to go sheep here. I think sheep, this is not a map with a healing spot. So if you connect with the Stabby, I guess the thought process is, oh, well, we'll tag the Stabby. They either have to get Clinico or they let it die. Okay. Problem is, as we've seen on many cases, sheeps just die before doing anything. And even if they do something, they're dead when they go in. So you have to make sure that you're hitting not just the Stabby, which it's unlikely that Gilbo's ever going to allow you to do that. The way this map is set up with this triangle in the center, it's very difficult to actually connect with anything. Now, I think that this was also possibly problematic, advancing the Blinky here. I get the idea of flipping the panic points, but I don't know that it did anything. Lastly, obviously, as mentioned a few moments ago, putting the Gesundheit up here means Gesundheit is dead. It's just not going to survive. So we end up walking through this turn. Because of the way this worked out, the Stabby's also able to just walk away. So you can't even get the sheep to connect. Now, this does admittedly free up some space for Lufee to be able to get some other Phobies, because notably he was already at 5. But I think at this point, it may have been worth... How much health do we have on these? These are all full health, so you can't even really dive with Blinky. Even though it's doing 500 damage, you can't get on something and kill it. There are too many melee Phobies here. And the jar follow-up is useful, and I think the jar is a decent response here. But the problem is you see that Gilbo's already at 6 points. 6 keys. It might have been worth just pulling back and banking yourself. In my opinion, I tend to try and bank whenever I see my opponent bank. Unless it's a scenario where I can flood the board that turn and cap a whole bunch of points before whatever their big monster is comes out. This, I also don't know if it's necessary, locking this point down. no matter where you are, I mean, I guess there's the argument that if they invade with Maggie or something, or Gravedigger, you can kill them. But I'm not a huge fan of putting the cat here. I don't know that it does anything. Although, admittedly, I don't know that the cat is doing anything for you at this point anyway. This was another rough spot. Admittedly, what is Lufee supposed to do? But this guarantees that, like, you can't counter-kill the Hevo here, is the problem. I guess the assumption was that Hevo was going to go, like, here, and hit the middle here, so that it would hit Sheep and this, as opposed to going down here and dodging all the traps. But I don't know that it's standing on a trap matters. Point being is maybe this Venus either needs to be farther up or farther back, so that way it dodges the attack, or it's able to hit, respectively, or it just doesn't take multiple things with it. At this point, I think the writing is on the wall, because I don't know what Lufee could pop out that would matter. So, for example, let's say Lufee played an erratic. I don't think it matters. I don't think you can ever get into position. Like, I don't think that an erratic, because again, only 6 keys. You're never going to get into position due to the lava. There was no obstacle break, you know, no blue Gravedigger that came out. So, I don't think that one's going to do much. Now, the Rocket Man actually is a Lufee signature, and I do like Rocket Man here. I think Rocket Man is a pretty decent answer, but it is notably, and you may not see it because I'm covering it, but Rocket Man's ability, if you can see it down here at the bottom, is melee. It needs to be standing next to the thing. And unfortunately, because of this Gravedigger statue, life is way more complicated, because that means you have to stand on lava to try and run this gauntlet. And even at 2100 health, it's not long for the world. As we see, Gilbo advances behind all of this and it means that you can't really get in there. The trap here is kind of irrelevant. This is one of those games that, yes, the Hevo is the cap on it, but the game was set up for Hevo because of what happened earlier in the game. Other keys were not forced out of Gilbo. Like, Gilbo didn't have to play other stuff to make something happen, and therefore was afforded the opportunity to bank the Hevo. We do see a super cool trap set here, but ultimately it didn't matter. I think there were too many burnt keys. As in keys that just didn't do anything for Lufee here. And that was what kind of spelled doom. The Gesundheit, the sheep, those could have been other things that maybe necessitated a response in a different way, and then Hevo doesn't show up, or sets an advantage into motion such that the Hevo ends up having to be a Hail Mary sort of thing. But we'll see how Game 2 plays out. Gravedigger from Lufee would have done a lot too. Yes, I mean, I don't know about the Venus play. I think Venus is fine, or would have been fine. I think the big issue was the Gesundheit and the sheep. It was basically 6 keys, but not just 6 keys. So that I know we're outside of the game here. So this would have been better as analysis in the game, but I'll leave this in the video. It's not just 6 keys that basically did nothing. Like, what did those 2 Phobies do? The Gesundheit hit the cat once? Like, okay. But here's the general moral of the story as a takeaway for people. Oh yeah, Blinky as well. Like, Blinky basically did nothing. So that's actually, like, 10 keys. So, putting aside that it's 10 keys, which is an enormous amount on a small map, on the turns, because Blinky could have done something. Like, Blinky was out there and threatening. Sheep basically was never in position to do a damn thing at all. And Gesundheit, like I said, hit the cat once, so, like, who cares? Granted, there was some forced movement on Gilbo's side, but here's the thing. On those 2 turns, an enormous amount of tempo was lost, because those 2 turns worth of plays were irrelevant. What do I mean by a tempo loss? Well, tempo is a difficult thing to define. If you played card games before, you probably heard that. But the general idea is that you are controlling the flow of the game. If you cede tempo to your opponent, you give tempo to your opponent, as in you make a tempo negative play, such as we saw, where those plays just didn't do anything. Your opponent has time to catch their breath, for lack of a better way to put it. They're able to develop their game plan, reposition as necessary. They're not under threat. That's why the intensely aggressive strategies frequently are very relevant and very good, because even if your opponent might have a good play to respond with, they're under pressure to do something, and they are being forced strategically, tactically to react to a certain thing. If you play too passively, whether intentionally or by placing incorrect phobies or making incorrect moves, it gives your opponent a lot more leeway. And that's basically what it boils down to. All right, let's jump into game 2. Just like before, we're going to do, the entertaining one, and I'm just going to try and shoutcast it, and then we're going to do the more analytical approach to game 2. And here we are in game 2. In the blue trunks, of course, is Lufee, the Heartbreaker, the Rocket Master himself, but in the orange trunks, we have Gilbo. We're starting out here on Rush Hour. Now, this is the Lufee that I expected. We see a very aggressive opening. We see a Droney, we have Bachelor, we have a Razormouth, and we see 2 cap points. The response from Gilbo, on the other hand, is a 1 cost and a Cyclops, which is pretty cool. This allows both players to have kind of what they want at this stage. You're seeing a bunch of board presence from Lufee. You're seeing a solid opener from Gilbo that allows them to somewhat counterbalance the opener from their opponent. And this is an opening that I really like from Lufee. This is a 4-point cap on turn 2. What I've found in recent times with Rush Hour is that being able to apply pressure, panic point pressure specifically, to your opponent in the early game is very important. It means that you're able to pressure their life total and force certain things out of them. And we just spent some time talking about positive and negative tempo plays. So here we see the Blinky follow-up, this time from our orange player, recapping some of the points, as well as advancing a 1 cost. But, as you'd imagine, those 1 costs don't last very long, and they go the way of the dodo very quickly. Instead, we now have a 4 cost Unbearable. Shout out to my Unbearable fans. I know you're out there. The Unbearable is going to take 1,000 years to roll up, and this actually I don't really like on this map. I find lobbers, especially 1-move lobbers, 1-moves in general on this map, are difficult. Often this map will revolve around a stalemate, and that stalemate is difficult to solve in a beneficial manner if you're only moving 1 space at a time. You're going to end up getting caught on this lava a lot, or forcing your other phobies into awkward positions, because you'd love to have the Unbearable tank because it's undead, it has a lot of health, but that isn't really an option most of the time. So we see a Primate and Gesundheit coming out, which is also a little surprising here. We saw the issues with the Gesundheit in the last map. On this map, I think, again, all the issues with 1 moves come back to the forefront. The Primate is okay, though. The larger cassowary aspect allows you to possibly break some of the stalemate, because you can just get in on something. But unfortunately, we see another good answer out of Gilbo to ruin Lufee's day, and that is Miss Moffat. Miss Moffat allows you to really break stalemates, because it's just, yeah, I'm going to yoink that thing and end up clobbering something. But from here, we see a response of both newly deads. Look at the timeout. Look at this. This is adorable. Look at them hearts. Look at that. Wow, there's no hearts there because Droney's in the way. Get the hell out of there, Droney. Droney, get lost. Look at those adorable hearts out of those newly deads going on their honeymoon, getting stuck in traffic here on Rush Hour. But they're inching their way up and are a good way to try and recap these points. The problem is, Gilbo has a number of phobies on the board, allowing them to nuke one of the newly deads and then just step on it. And we actually see a Resurrect Phobie response from Gilbo, giving Gilbo an option to just go step on something. Just get in there and eliminate it. But we do have the advantage for Lufee briefly of the majority of panic points, because this droney has managed to actually stave off death up until turn 12, which is astonishing by most accounts. Now, here's the issue. One of the issues. The droney goes down, whatever, but we do see Miss Moffat come in to yoink the unbearable. So the unbearable is now sitting on a lava tile. It gets clobbered. Oh, and by the way, here's the insult to the injury. The body block on the Gesundheit means that you can't even connect with the spider. This is effectively 4 keys donated. Ouchtown. And then we see the flipping of the panic points, of course, because the stabby is able to take it safely. While the primate will be able to push a lot of damage, it's not necessarily going to do a lot. Now, we do get a cool follow-up from Lufee. The Gesundheit is able to inch in and snipe the jar. Gotta feel good about that. But we can't quite take down this stabby. We do see, however, your favorite and mine, Barzilla. Barzilla comes in, and he's going to start having some toxic breath left and right. And we see a Blinky follow-up. A Blinky follow-up with 6 keys remaining for Lufee and 12 keys remaining for Gilbo. Is that really what he wants? We'll have to see how it works out. But the pull is down. The majority of the panic points are in Gilbo's favor. And we're probably looking at a dead primate? We're looking at a dead primate. Ouch. There's also going to be a dead Gesundheit, because something's going to get it. We see Blinky come in for the creepy as hell finish. What is Blinky exactly? I'm not really sure. It's kind of gross. But anyway, we will see a dead Jackalope shortly, I expect. I anticipate that Lufee is going to try and kill it, but I'm hoping he doesn't. Why? Because that means Blinky's probably going to die. The Spider Pole will be back online. You have Murder Wing, you have Cyclops, and you have an opposing Blinky just lurking right there. And we see the Rocket Master just... Tell me this intro when this thing walks is not like the Bushwhackers. Shout out to my WWF fans from like 30, 40 years ago, I guess. It kind of reminds me of the Bushwhackers. Not quite. But anyway, we do see a lot of the panic points, and by a lot, I mean all the panic points going blue. So we do have the kill onto the Jackalope, but I think we're going to see the revenge kill on not just the newly dead, but Blinky. Maybe not right now, but probably soon. Is it enough? Okay, it's enough, because there is Hevo, the big bad, the boss man himself that is Hevo, coming out to play just like in Game 1. So, the panic points still remain primarily under blue players' control. A 4-to-1 advantage, which is important. Oh, wow, this Blinky actually lived. I was really expecting that to die. So we get some damage onto the spider, which is relevant. It is relevant. So we see Barzilla and Hevo take a very aggressive posture here. An exceptionally aggressive posture, because I'm expecting that Lufee is anticipating a face check here. That Lufee feels with 0 keys to 0 keys, gotta go hard. You have the majority of the panic points. If your opponent elects to take time off in order to recap those points, that's just extra damage that's going to be going onto their heart. But the problem here, and I'm a little surprised that Gilbo had done this, the Temptress is in position, or could have been in position, to beat up on the Hevo. And obviously it's going to burn through the health very quickly. You still have a very much alive Miss Moffat, which means that pulls are going to allow some displacement and cause more badness to happen. But you do, at the end of the day, have a Barzilla that is going to be clobbering stuff. Now, this is the play that I expected. There was a Rocket Man freeze onto the Cyclops. This body blocks a lot. While the Rocket Man is going to get absolutely pulverized here, because look at that, there's 4 Phobies, 8 attacks. Plus, here's the other problem. In case you didn't notice, well, we'll save that for the breakdown afterwards, but the ice gets melted by fire. So the Hevo is able to free it up very quickly. Unfortunately, that play didn't quite work out the way you'd want it. And there's really nothing that could have helped. No matter what Phobie Lufee went for the freeze on, it broke it up. Yeah, the ice melts. We'll take a look at that more closely, player, in the analytical breakdown after this. So, as you'd imagine, Lufee needs to just go for it here. We'll have to see exactly how much health is remaining. It's entirely possible that maybe Lufee gets there if Rocket Man was positioned instead of for the freeze, but instead got another hit on the heart or something like that. But from here, I think it's all she wrote. I think most people can see where the writing is on the wall. But I think Lufee made the correct play, the decision to say, look, I'm not winning it this way. I need to go in or I'm not getting it. So we're going to pause here just so I know going into the next game. It's 800 health. 377 health. 377 health. That might be a Rocket Man hit, chat. But it's possible that the Rocket Man could not have gone there safely. Let's take a closer peek at that game. So we're jumping back into the same game that we just broke down. Or we just did the shoutcast version of. Although I was leaning more into my traditional line of breaking things down. Now, this is an interesting opener from Lufee. I don't know if Lufee typically does this on this map. Typically I open with Murder Wing. You could arguably do Maggie. Taking this pocket point, you know, this spot or this, well, it's this spot going first, but, you know, this is the mirrored one. And then sending a 1 key here. Having this opener is interesting. Obviously, the Droney affords you the ability to basically go wherever your opponent doesn't. So I kind of like this. I can respect it. The Cyclops opener from Gilbo is weird. I'm not really sure why that happened, but the 1 cost up here just to cap point, sure. While there's some abnormalities to this from the games that I've typically seen, I don't think that this is necessarily, you know, right or wrong in any particular fashion. Now, as mentioned when I was doing the more shoutcast version just moments ago, I like the idea of doing exactly what Lufee's doing right now. Just get on everything. Now, I kind of expected a jar out of Gilbo, because the combination of Bachelor plus jar means that this is a dead Droney, and there's no way to really punish the jar from this position. But ultimately, we see the elimination of Bachelor down here. That's expected. The Blinky's a little weird, but it does immediately recap that point. That's fine. It could have been a Murder Wing. It could have been whatever. There was going to be something here. And then we see Contortio as follow-up. At this stage in the game, I really don't think... Again, I know I'm repeating from moments ago, but I don't think any of this is bad or weird. I think that this is fine until this point. I don't like the Unbearable. As mentioned in the shoutcast portion, I don't like 1-move Phobies on this because the lava just seems to make this positioning around the center point super awkward, which you'd expect. So Unbearable needs to be in the front and tank if you can help it, and it's super hard to get him there. I think Cyclops is pretty good. I do like Cyclops. It's just interesting that Cyclops was the choice here. Because it's not typically a phobie that I see. Like, I see it on this map, but not as turn 1. Now, I can respect the Unbearable, but I don't really like it. I would rather have seen a Gin Sting. You know, and that's not a meme for the channel with bees. It's more just, I think a Gin Sting would have been better. But we do see the eliminations here. Again, Unbearable Gesundheit, 1-move Phobies, not a fan on this map. I don't think the Gesundheit really does much here either. It is likely to only get a single hit. It's likely to only get a single hit on whatever, because obviously it's just going to get blown up afterwards. And I think it would have been better just to bank. Now, I don't know what Lufee's collection looks like at the top end. We obviously know that there is a Barzilla, there's a Rocket Man, but maybe there weren't other things there that Lufee wanted to bank for. And now at this stage, we're kind of going all in on the 1-move Phobies, but I can respect the Newly Deads for this reason. The stalemate. I know we keep coming back to that, but the stalemate in this map, trying to recap this center point, comes up a lot. So being able to just say, hey, I'm going to send something on there, you need to commit something else, and then blow up that other thing, I think it's valuable. I think the Newly Deads are fine. Do I want both? Probably not. Probably not. So I think that if we take back the Unbearable, the Gesundheit, and the Newly Dead, that's what? 7 keys that could be something else? A 4 and a 3, a 7, a 5 and a 2, whatever. I think that that would have opened up more options for Lufee. I do like the aggressive attempts here. Like, getting these points is important. And as I mentioned earlier, I found on this map, the more aggressive you can be, the better off you are. Now, that's probably universally true, but in this particular case, it's a large map, you can push a lot of damage. Unfortunately, the aggression with Unbearable here is punished. I'm sure Lufee was kicking himself with this one. I know if I was in that position, because I've done it tons of times, that I would be. And you're just in a horrible position down here. Like, the South is basically lost here. The Unbearable's dead, the Gesundheit is toast. There's no way to end up getting the Flopsy, or whichever one this is, effectively. Here, it's looking kind of grim, but Lufee did bank to 13 keys, so the follow-up here can be very strong. I do love this play, getting the jar, which I don't know if Gilbo was caught unaware or just allowed that to happen, because there was really no other position in order to do what they needed to do, but that's gotta hurt. Speaking of gotta hurt, and this is where I think having those extra keys would have helped. We have not seen a jar out of Lufee. In fact, I don't know if Lufee has a jar, but the fact that this survives is brutal. Why? You just have to spend more time dealing with it. Now, ultimately, the combination of these end up taking down this. I don't remember if there's a follow-up. We'll find out momentarily. But imagine if this Stabby was no longer there. There's no way this Primate dies then, right? Because it would have only taken one attack, effectively, from the Stabby due to the death, or maybe that damage ends up on Hevo. But it means the Stabby's not there. Oh, and by the way, all the panic points, or the majority of the panic points, are blue again. So remember, 377 damage is what we have to keep in mind when we're talking about this, because that's how much health was left on the heart. So it could be 225 damage from this turn. If we didn't have, you know, the Unbearable and other stuff. Now, the game may have played out differently, but if Lufee had the ability to pop out a jar here instead of this Blinky, or instead of other stuff, and finish this off, because again, maybe the jar would be under-leveled, that could have made a big difference here. So we see the reposition as expected. We knew this was coming because we watched it, obviously. But this is a turn, again, that could have gone... Oh, it's 215 damage, not 225. And we do see this go down, which, again, would not have happened had this Stabby died. I think the play that Lufee made, depending on what the collection looks like, that sort of thing, may have been fine. But again, the South here is looking horrendous. It's reinforced, it's going to be tough to break, and we can't get this Moffat off the board. I don't know if Lufee has access to Miss Moffat, but if you don't, it hurts. Like, it's painful to not have access to Miss Moffat when your opponent does. Now, I agree with this play, and I have to wonder at this point. Obviously, Gilbo has 9 keys. I imagine Lufee was anticipating that the Hevo was coming out. We're going to see, you know, the Bushwhackers themselves show up here with Rocket Man. You have to assume that in Lufee's head, it's, okay, there's going to be a Hevo 3.0 coming, right? I saw it last game. Gilbo talks about it all the time with his Stabby opener. I would expect to see it. But, is Rocket Man the answer? So Rocket Man does 560 damage, so we absolutely would have killed the heart, but we got to get closer to that turn to see if maybe Lufee would have died if the invade went a different way. Is Rocket Man the answer? It's Lufee's go-to 6, I think, so I can understand going with it. You need a 2-move. At this stage, I think Lufee knows that the game plan is go hard. I don't know, maybe not. It's at just under 7,000 health, so maybe Lufee doesn't want to do it yet, but I could definitely see the formulation of that starting to happen. So, in the South, we see the Blinky play happening. We get the Newly Deads to step on the Flopsy or Mopsy, whichever one it is. And here's where, okay, now we're putting a hurt on Gilbo. At this point, if I was Gilbo, I'd be... Honestly, I think I'd feel okay. Given that you had 7,000 health, and now 6,000. You can tank it a little bit. But I think the gears have to start turning in your head to say, hey, how do I lose this game? I lose this game if they dive my heart. So I either need to recap panic points like this turn, or I need to make sure that I'm not out of position. Now, given that you have Miss Moffat, and the Miss Moffat is not on cooldown, means that a reposition is available, you can make something mean and nasty happen. The Hevo, I think, is, you know, a reasonable call here, but basically, I don't think I would have repositioned the Temptress. If you don't reposition the Temptress, I think you completely eliminate the possibility of the backdoor play of coming in and just collapsing on the heart. Because at that point, I think that that's Lufee's only out. Because imagine that the Temptress is now just south of the Hevo. Barzilla and Hevo might have been able to hit it. I think only Barzilla. Yeah, because Hevo was like up here. So you would have put a little damage on it, but it would have slowed their advance. Now, I can respect the idea of trying to recap these points, because if you don't recap these points here, because in the game, when I first looked at it, I didn't like the Temptress play, but I think it does make sense. You do need to recap these points. It flips it so that way you're not taking a ton of damage. You also can't put the Hevo on there. There might have been a different way to do or have this set up so that way you're standing on certain things. But you can't expose the Hevo to all of this because it would have just gotten frozen. And Hevo is the key here because of, and I mentioned when we were talking about it earlier that I would come back to this, it does fire damage. Why do we care? When Rocket Man freezes with cryostasis, freezes an enemy unit, frozen units can't move or attack. Fire melts this by 1 round. So it counts as an enemy, we'll say, as we saw, for the purposes of the AoE from Hevo. Now, I don't believe it... Well, actually, it probably does do damage to the underlying phobie. I didn't catch that. I don't know if it's just melting it or if it's actually putting the fire under it. I assume the fire is under it, so it should take damage. So this is the turn. We have this at 29-27. You're not taking any more panic point damage. The big issue here is if Rocket Man was here. It is, or here for that matter, it is in range of Hevo 3.0, which means that all of this damage is going to splash onto the others. Now, Barzilla doesn't really care, but Hevo certainly does. It's only at 1100 health. It's going to get hit twice for like 900, well, 800, and then if it stayed, it would be 9 from the burn. But what's actually going to happen is it would get yoinked by Miss Moffat and then blown up by the Temptress, or it could have got blown up by the Temptress anyway. Like, maybe the yoink happens, you don't even need to worry about the splash from Hevo, and because you have 1,000,000 damage here. What could have happened, though, I guess, is... So this would have been... Does 560, it would have been at 2,300 and change. It would have taken 9 and 8, 17, and 5 is 22. It likely would have died. So if Lufee did not make this play, the Rocket Man and Hevo likely die, and then the game just ends immediately, because obviously the Barzilla is not making it. And the other issue is there's no better freeze target because no matter what, it's getting thawed out. So as we can see, it does end up thawing here. It's no longer frozen. It is, in fact, standing on fire. But it's also standing on the healing spot, so it doesn't matter. So this game clearly came down to the wire and was super duper close. So shout out to both competitors, because this was a really tight game. I think some minor play differences could have put this in Lufee's hands. But I mean, it doesn't get much closer than only 370-something damage remaining on your heart. And imagine if you could ignite the tiles under the heart. with Barzilla. Would have been pretty good, right? But yeah, the cluster here is... This is exactly what would have happened if the Rocket Man was in a different position. Which again goes back to, was Rocket Man the right call? I'm sure part of it, as mentioned, was it's the go-to for Lufee. So I do it all the time with Erratic. It's a comfort pick. And probably the idea of, well, Gilbo's likely slamming Hevo, so I need an answer to Hevo. If I can freeze it, I'm in good shape. The problem is, well, there was probably no way that it was ever going to freeze, so maybe something else would have been better. I don't know what would have... Because, anything that would have been positioned there would have resulted in a dead Hevo, possibly also a dead whatever the thing was. So, I don't know that it really mattered. But regardless, this was a pretty cool game. This was definitely a lot of fun to cast. We're going to be doing more Fright Night breakdowns, and we're going to be doing more viewer game breakdowns. So if you're interested in playing in Fright Night or getting one of your games reviewed, head on over to the Randoms Thoughts Discord. You can check it in the video description, or !! Discord over on the live stream. RTChompGG over on Twitch. But that's going to do it for this particular review. So as always, everybody, thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and Black Lives Matter.